What's up, everybody? Corey Hughes, Bloody History. Continuing on with this second lost interview of Loran Hall, which is a Garrison interview that turned up in the Harold Weisberg files. So, here we go. Remember, he's being questioned by Garrison about a lot of the people who are hanging out around the Los Angeles fringe, NSDP, which is what the National States Right NSRP, National States Rights Party. But they're Nazis. Bottom line, they're American Nazis. So let's continue on. Who is this fellow, William Garland, who turns out to have been killed? Garland? Oh, yeah, William Garland. He knew Gale and Drennan, and he took a fall back in, I think it was 1965, for having explosives and automatic weapons on his chicken ranch out in San Fernando Valley. And he got killed in a car accident here about the 4th of this month, or the 4th of last month. No other cars involved, no other witnesses, just killed. It's my understanding that he knew Troy Houghton real well. What can you tell us about Troy Houghton? He's the one that disappeared now. I met Troy one time. This was at a meeting in El Monte, and these were all Minutemen, and I would like you'd follow these under your Nazi types. And then Garrison says, in other words, the Bradley Gale type as distinguished from the Dupuy type. Right, and that's basically what that whole group there at the house was. And when the meeting was over, one of the ladies would say, would you like to meet Troy Houghton? I said, sure. So she took me outside and says he's down there by that car, and it's a dark street and all the lights are out. So I'm walking down the street, and I walk right into a gun in my stomach, and he's telling me, I got to be real careful about what's going on because my car's already been shot at, and I've already got to be careful. You're doing a hell of a good job. How would you like to go in as an instructor for us? And I said, something might be arranged on this would I come back, from Cuba. And he said, boy, we need people like you. By that time, he had removed the gun, I take it. No, right there. When's this? This would have been probably in July or August of 1963. You see, all my talk centered from July to the end of September, and then we left L.A. about the 1st of October for Dallas, and then I've never given another talk since. Did Houghton have any connection with Gale or Bradley? I can't, I'll put it this way. I know that Kenneth Gale, Colonel Gale's brother, is deeply involved with the Minutemen thing in San Diego. He's with Houghton's wife, more or less running the thing right now. So I would have to surmise that Gale knows Houghton. Houghton's from the San Diego area? Right, and this is where Gale's brother, Kenneth, I think, is from, around La Jolla. This is just what I hear. I don't know if there's anything to it or not. I've got a note from Steve here, and he says that you mentioned two people that we should ask about because he didn't have any background on them. One was Duarte, a colonel in the Cuban Revolution. Is he of any significance? I don't think so. I don't know why he put this on there. I think because he didn't know anything about him and thought we might. Duarte was a major in the Cuban Revolution. This is what's purported. P.D. Seversy wants his ass real bad. L.A. Peter Seversy. Seversy. They know that he's got explosives, and they also know that Patrick's trying to contact him. What does he look like? Anything distinguishing about him? I'd seen a picture of him, by God. Go get that book. Would you, of the photographs? Anyway, Russell knows that Patrick is somewhere connected with the Brown Berets. Now, these are the Mexicans in L.A. that have been raising hell with everything. And they know that when the bomb goes, the Brown Berets are going to be there, be the ones that will do a lot of the blowing. And they know that Duarte has got explosives, and they know that Patrick is trying to get in touch with Duarte. And what they're afraid of now is Patrick is going to get in contact with Duarte, get the explosives, give them the Brown Berets, and then the whole shittery is going to blow up. And this comes from Seversy. You saw a picture that looked like him. There's possibly, because I just, even if it's close, I can help us, Skip. Give us an idea of what he looks like. Lou, do you have the photograph of Patrick's Raiders on which we've put the names of each one around the side? Gary's got it. I wonder what he would be doing with it. He took it to verify with his friends the other day to make sure it was marked properly. Where's Gary now? He went up this morning to take his physical for the draft board. Oh, that's beautiful. Take the mustache off and add the board. You look better with a mustache, we've decided. The reason that we did that, we know there was a period when you did not have a mustache to construct what you did look like then. I don't know how close that came. I thought possibly I had seen the one that might look similar, and I thought it would kind of match up for you. Does he have any resemblance to that person we're looking for? We're looking for a heavyset Latin who's been a constant escort of Oswald in the New Orleans area. Oh my God. Here we go. Does he have any resemblance to that person we're looking for? We're looking for a heavyset Latin who's been a constant escort of Oswald's in New Orleans. This is, do you have a picture of him? No. What does he look like? Described by everybody who saw him extremely powerful, very dark. That fits Duarte. Duarte, my fucking ass, dude. It's Lawrence Howard. Usually thick neck, and not all of them, but a number of them say a scar on the left eyebrow. Yep, Lawrence Howard. But they all are conscious of an unusually thick neck and an impression of real power. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll get you a picture from Russell and get that sent to you, because he's got the picture and his name is Jose. He's used a lot of aliases. He shows up in California and he's gone for a while. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, Russell said that he'd been in New Orleans. At one time, you mean? Yeah, he said he'd also been to Miami and wanted to know if I knew him. That's Russell of LAPD. Yeah, LAPD, Subversive of Intelligence. Do you recall what he looked like in the photograph? Did he seem powerful? He looked powerful. He had a mustache, as I recall what it was. It was a mugshot, so all you could see was just part of his neck and his head. I didn't find it in this book, but there was something that might, of course, you really can't tell by photographs now. I'll give you a real prime example of it. There's a fellow in California whose name is Gilbert, and he's associated with Renuzzi. Like I say, Renuzzi and Bradley and all of this. Well, I don't want to interrupt you, but who is Renuzzi? Renuzzi had the bookstore and an insurance company on Hollywood Boulevard. The guy's name is Gilbert. I forget what his first name was. I've seen him around the bookstore because he worked there. He's wanted for armed robbery, and he's wanted for attempted murder with a gun. And he was wanted for stealing explosives, I believe, at one of the Hercules plants. And he takes off, and he's got a picture of him within a few days after he leaves. And he goes to Canada, and he's in Canada about 5 or 6 months. Who's that? Gilbert. And like all of this ties with Canada. You know what that means, don't you? Yeah. What does it mean? There's a report that somebody said they know who killed Kennedy, and this happened in Canada. We found pretty consistently that anybody visiting Canada regularly usually turns out to be in the CIA, because they have a place out there where they go, especially in Montreal. Louis Bloomfield. I think really that the next time that you come to LA, I'd sure like to get Russell together with you, because he's got a lot of stuff on Canada. It's like he thinks right now that Houghton, or whatever his name is in Canada. Who's that? Sergeant Russell. He's in the LAPD Subversive. You can tell him it might interest him that we find Canada coming up all the time, especially Montreal, and we're satisfied that the reason it comes up is because the CIA using Montreal headquarters for part of this operation. So here's what happens. Gilbert goes to Canada, and he's there for 5 or 6 months, and when he comes back, like, you don't even recognize the man. Russell says it was an absolute and complete change, even his style of talking, his habits. Like, I talk and I use my hands, and so did Gilbert, but when he came back, it's like he didn't use his hands when he talked. It's like when you have a twitch in the eye. You don't have that twitch anymore. He lost 40 pounds of weight, changed the color of his hair, had his hair cut, grew a mustache, and like you wouldn't... he said he stood in court, and the guy was standing there by his lawyer, and he wouldn't even stand as he was called up to the front. He said, I couldn't believe it, because I couldn't testify against the man, because he's not the same man that I knew. What did he look like before? Do you know? No, he's probably 5'10 and a half, 5'11", probably weighed 175 or 180, blonde hair, kind of thin in his face. And this is what I was looking like to one of this right here. I was trying to see if this is what it was. He was built a whole lot like this one here, but I don't think it's him. Do you know Gilbert's first name? No, I don't. What kind of work did he do? He worked in the bookstore, Renuzzi's bookstore. Was he associated with the Nazi type? Oh, yeah. When did he go to Canada? I think Russell said it was 65 or 66. What about Duarte? You started out telling us about Duarte. Jose Duarte is one of his names. Yes, Jose Duarte is one of his names. And you're going to try to get us a mugshot. I'll get one and I'll get it sent to you. I'll get a copy of one on Gilbert. We'll have to set up some liaison with Russell. What's his precise inquiry about, so we'll know. What happened was this. The sheriff's department a week ago Monday started a full investigation into Bradley. Their reason for it was that they know that he's now associated, or they feel that he's now associated with all these radical groups. Like, he's really not a moderate, like he says. Like, he pops up every fucking place, including Montreal. Well, as people, I don't know if he does. I don't know. I can't put him there, but like they're finding out all this stuff, and now they're wondering to themselves what really is going on. And then with you wanting him, they started a full investigation of him a week ago. LAPD Subversive is doing the same thing, and this is Russell's job on Bradley. And it's like he says, I can't have Jaffe come here because I don't want anybody to know I'm in cooperation with Garrison, because then I will become ineffective in a way because I can find out things just because I'm LAPD Subversive and I got my own informants and all of this here. When you see him, remember to tell him this. Tell him that Canada is very significant because we find that Montreal comes up again and again, and the indication is that one of the CIA bases of operation they use is there. Bradley has been there too. It's very, very significant. You're going to try to get a mugshot of Jose Duarte? Yeah, I'll get one of Duarte for you. Why don't I write some of this stuff down? Mugshot of Duarte. This thing with Gilbert is absolutely unbelievable. It really was. How did Gilbert come up in your mind? Is he associated with Duarte? No, he's associated with Renuzzi and with the Nazis out there, and like they're in association with Bradley, and he's doing 2 to 10, no 2 to 20 because he's got 2 1 to 10s thrown at him. Who's that? Gilbert. We got a mugshot of him as he looks now? Yeah, I'll get one of each. Okay. Because he's got one of each. How about a Carlton Weston Johnson? Is that significant? Oh, yeah. Carlton Weston Johnson. And the way this came up was I mentioned the fact that I went out to a gun store around the Fullerton area and the Riverside area, and that this fellow who had the gun shop had a Mexican friend who had stolen some AR-14s. And he referred me over to Juan Erquiaga's place and gave me Erquiaga's address. And when I went over there, this Weston Johnson was there. And he had a gun store out, I think, in Santa Ana. And Russell says that he owned a Rambler wagon. And then he went to Arizona quite a bit of the time in 63. They went on a caravan one time, and that I knew about in 63. Is Carlton Weston Johnson associated with the Nazi group? Yeah. What model wagon does he have? I got it written down here. Did it have racks on it? I mean, a luggage rack. He's asking about the Green Rambler station wagon. Lawrence Howard's. And we know that Lawrence Howard and William Seymour and Loran Hall were the trio running together. And so the idea that they fled, and they've all fled in that fucking vehicle. So you see how he's dancing around this fucking thing? God, if only Garrison knew. God, if only I had a time machine, I'd go back and tell him. Fuck. Do you know the color of it? I don't know the color of it. Russell says he thought it was either beige one or one of those colors like that. Where would he be living now? In L.A. What about Crespi? Nico Crespi. Sounds familiar. In Dallas. A Cuban? Yeah. Small? Yeah. This is one thing I was telling you about. Instead of being Kiki Ferrer, it was Nico Crespi. That was him. Is his folks in Mexico? I don't know. If they made the substitution, that would be interesting to us. It's possible that you said Nico Crespi and they changed the name. It could. I don't know. But I know that that's the name Nikki Crespi is. I'm almost positive instead of Kiki, it's Nikki. Do you have a photograph of him? No. Does he work at Texas Optical or something? Or did he? I don't know. But what you say makes sense. Patrick mentioned it to us, and he mentioned him. He said that you had met him somewhere in connection with Odio. All right. I have a feeling this is nonsense, but let's pull everything on Nico Crespi. See, when I hear that, I think of Onofio Pecorora, or Nofio Pecora, the alias. So, but that's connected more to New Orleans. So Nico Crespi, nah, I don't know it. Please, guys in the chat, let's pull Nico Crespi, Crespi. All right, then we seem to have a blank page in here. How about Ralph Schlafter in Patrick's outfit, I think? No, I don't. All right, let me pause on Ralph Schlafter for a minute. Because Ralph Schlafter was one of my suspects for being one of the tramps. And so I dug deep into Ralph Schlafter, and it turned out to be a dead end. He's kind of irrelevant, just one of the lower hangarounds at No Name Key. And he pops up later on once Garrison's doing his investigation. And he pops up I think he goes and talks to Garrison at some point. But yeah, he ends up being kind of irrelevant. Ever hear of the Melmar Corporation in Miami? Is that well known? It's at the end of Rockaman Road. No. How about Augustinovich? Ever hear that name? Ronald Augustinovich, the Alpha 66 people? All right, ladies and gentlemen, go out and find a photograph, the only known photograph of Ronald Augustinovich, and you fucking tell me that doesn't look exactly like Lem Johns. Seriously. Well, I met some of the Alpha 66 people because I was trying to get a boat off of them one time. Is he an old man? No, he's about 34. No, there was one other name like that. Who in the hell was it that brought it up? I think Steve brought it up. Clinton Hampton. Yeah, Clinton Hampton. Do you have a photograph of him? Yeah, we've got a photograph of Hampton. He looks a whole lot like this here, but not quite yet. How about color? He was, I would say, he was not Mexican appearing, but dark complexion. Do you want a non-Havana cigar? If you're like me, you're really ruined. None of them are the same as Havana. They're like paper. I get Havana every once in a while. It's all the difference in the world, isn't it? I have a friend who goes to England all the time. He had a director for the movies. He's a director for the movies. The nearest I found is El Cid. They come to the U.S. sometimes. I'll tell you a real good cigar. Monte Cristo? No, they're made in California. Some Cubans out there make them. Did they get Havana leaf or something? I don't know, but I'm telling you, it's a beautiful cigar. Oh, my God. Tastes like Havana? Yeah. It's a hell of a cigar. But anyway, he brought me back 2 cigars from London. I wish they figured out some way we could get the cigars back. There must be some way. You get some people with a boat, and I'll bring you all the Havana cigars you want. I'll get a week's leave and go with you. You're too big of a target, Jim. What's Seymour doing now? Do you know? This is the truth. Okay, anytime someone opens a sentence with "this is the truth," it's not the truth, okay? I have not Seymour or Howard since about the 8th of November, 1963, and that's a lie. Even when all this stuff came out on television about me and Howard, I haven't seen them. I've seen 2 of them. I've seen Patrick and Hargraves last Thursday. That's the first time I've seen them since about February or March of 63. Do you know a guy named Barragona? Have you heard of Barragona? The name is familiar, but I couldn't. He's a friend of Ferry's, a friend of Dave Ferry's. Be sure while Skip's still around to find that final note of Ferry's where he talks about Barragona. We have a copy of that, don't we? I want him to see it so he can see a real Nazi. How about Ark? Danny Garcia Ark? No? Tom Beckham? No, I seen pictures of Beckham. Gehrig? Rudy Diaz? Tony Cosa? I knew Tony something in Dallas, a Cuban who was a friend of Nico's. Let me ask you, when you came to New Orleans, did these guys take you anywhere but the laundry? They didn't take you anyplace else on Decatur Street? No, we never. In fact, nobody was in the car with us except Pat and myself, and we drove right straight into New Orleans. As I recall, Patrick called this meeting on the phone, and the guy came down, and he said, meet me at the laundry. Frank Bartz. I think he was there waiting for us when we got there, and he used the telephone directory. I don't think he called, but he used the telephone directory for an address, and then we went over, and he got instructions from Bartz about Laborde, about how to get to that street. Was that around Paris Avenue, do you recall? I can tell you, Parchester? I don't know. I can tell you this, in that it was an old house, a real old, and it was a 2-story, and that the top of it came to a peak like this, and it looked like it was a narrow house. This is the best I can recall. I think it was a duplex. I think there was an apartment on one side. Then Laborde showed up. Larry never did show up. His son was there. You didn't hear anything of the discussions with Bartz? No, I can no more tell you what was... Oh, they talked about groups. I could hear that. I gathered them from there, and it was some training going on around here someplace, but that's all that I could tell you because I couldn't even tell you what they were talking about. Did Patrick tell you the significance of Bartz, why he wanted to see him? No, Patrick sure knows people in every town, doesn't he? Yeah. Ever encounter much of the DRE in Miami? I went over to the DRE office once with Patrick, and they were talking about the teletype machine, and they just got in, and they were talking about several communications they just got from Cuba, and they were talking about sending a couple of the representatives to California to get with this free Cuba committee. Who would they have a connection with? Oh, I don't know. They had a goddamn thing sitting right here in their office. Or a TWX connection with. I don't know, but they had the goddamn thing sitting right here in their office. I can't imagine who'd be on the other end except some U.S. government facility. I have no idea, but they sure had a teletype thing in there. Patrick describes it in one of his letters, which I'll show you when I come to it after we finish going through the details. I'll show you how they faked some of these pictures. Did you ever hear of a guy called Warren Carroll? Sounds like I've heard the name before. It might be somebody else that I've... How about North Hollywood? N.N. Carroll in North Hollywood. This is where I'd associate it. Yeah, did they? Guys, let's see if we can't find everything on Warren Carroll or N.N. Carroll in North Hollywood. No, this is connected with the North Hollywood group, but that's the only way it comes up. I gave a talk. I think I gave a talk, 2 or 3 talks in the North Hollywood area, like at Toluca Lake, and the guy named Carroll. Goddamn, how does that? Because this name, that you've said North Hollywood, it fits. I can remember. It's just one of an accumulation of names. All we have is North Hollywood, California, and everyone who comes up in North Hollywood seems to be in that group. Why don't you write it down, maybe with a question mark, and maybe it will come up. I think it's N.N. Carroll, North Hollywood, and Warren Carroll is apparently a different person. He's a scriptwriter for Hunt, a former CIA agent. N.L. Butler? Not that I recall. Patrick Crowley? No, I tried to get them, but I never managed to get the ones that had the money. Garrison then says, the International Anti-Communist Brigade is located in Fairhope, Alabama. I wonder how many people are in that. Charles J. Hirsch, North Hollywood, California. How does that come up, Tom? Is that one of Ruby's calls? That's a relative to Ruby. That's an in-law. I think that's one of the in-laws. That's Ruby's relative. In-law. Ever hear of Alexander Gruber? Goddamn, see, Jim Garrison knew a whole lot more than people give him credit for. No. How about Jose Antonio Lanusa of the DRE in Miami? His name doesn't mean anything to me. I met, there was probably, here's a fellow that worked for Texas Instrument Company named Charles Clear. It says it was a friend of General Walker. As the FBI explains, he's the owner of a 57 Chevy with the license plate cut out. He works for Texas Instruments, KLIHR. Guys, let's pull everything on Charles Clear, KLIHR. Isn't this where Nico Crespi worked? No, I don't think anything more about Nico Crespi than I've already said, other than he was a Cuban living in Dallas. Is he still living there? And then Garrison says, I don't know. We haven't dug into that. I think he might be quite an interesting character. Hall says, I really don't want to go to Dallas to get into it myself. I'm afraid I'd wound up in trouble. Ever hear of a guy named D.H. McFadden? He's a preacher or something, someone that gives speeches or something. We don't know, except that he's an individual who had a room in Dallas at the time of the assassination, and after he checked out, 3 shells were found in his room. Nobody knows anything else about him. That's enough to be of some small interest. What was the name? It's probably not a real name, but D.H. McFadden. These are just loose names that we're giving you so they won't all be coordinated. Did you ever know Louis McWillie in Cuba? No. Wait a minute now. Let me back off from that. I was in prison with Santos Trafficante, who was the big wheel of the mafia over there, and there was another fellow in there with him, and I don't know what his name was. I know that he'd been kicked out of the States once and was in Italy and had got a forged French passport and went to Argentina and got a forged Argentina passport and went to Cuba and worked Santo Trafficante there. Now this I found out when we were in prison. Interesting stuff, huh? Loran Hall knew Trafficante. And a guy named Henry Savadra. Henry Savadra, I have strong suspicions, is an alias for our friend in Hollywood. William Randall, you ever heard of him? No. George Lyman Payne? No. Robert W. Parker, Orange County, a munitions man. He gathers munitions. Looks like one of our friends. What's his name? Robert W. Parker. No. Do we have volume 17 around? A typical NSRP reference. They come up all the time. You might look at 566 in volume 17. NSRP pops up all over, not just in California. That was NSRP that had that tape. They got more than just a few pages that came out. There's a lot more than that. Here's a curious reference, Tom. The Students' Revolutionary Council, DRE, and after the reference in volume 11, it says Odio. I thought all the discussion there was the other group was used. The Revolutionary Hunter. I didn't know they mentioned the DRE, did you? Is that in reference to her testimony? I don't know. It says Odio. The Dre is interesting because of Brinier and the CIA, and it says Odio here, volume 11, 373, Texas Import-Export, Morris Tannerhill. Ever hear of him? No. James K. Warner, NSRP. Is he from Dallas? It doesn't indicate. Some places it indicates, others it doesn't. We have to contact the source. James K. Warner, NSRP, an ex-American Nazi. You know the name list. Anyone that's dug into this seriously, it goes past 2,000 names. This is a kind of short list. You ever hear of a guy named Youngblood? Yeah, he's a friend of Patrick's, if it's the same one in San Francisco. I remember him mentioning something about Youngblood. I think we were at Jose Norman's house in Los Angeles, and if I'm not mistaken, Youngblood had been to Patrick's camp or something down in the Keys and was, I'm almost positive, in 63 when we were in Los Angeles before we went to Miami together, that Youngblood was in San Francisco. What connotation do you have of Youngblood? An adventurer? Yeah, this is what I would gather. No, it wasn't Jose Norman's house, but God, we went to a fellow's house. Christ, I think he worked for a radio station or a newspaper. He sold advertising or something like this for the radio or television or something. He sold advertisement. Patrick and him were talking about Youngblood. Did you see him? Youngblood? Yeah. No, the only thing I knew was that they were talking about, and I recall Youngblood had been with Patrick down in the Keys for maybe a month or so. As I recall, this is what it was. Here's a summary of some of the vehicles that came up in the Dallas radio reports on the 22nd. A red 63 Impala with Georgia plates. Georgia plates. Who lives in Georgia? Could it be David Leon Miller? Let me know if any of these sound familiar. 57 green and white Ford. White Pontiac station wagon. Then we've got the Rambler. Any of those sound familiar besides the Rambler? No, Patrick told me, this is what Patrick said. Patrick said something about, might be interesting to you, is that Boats Welch owned a Rambler, and he also owned a black Ford. And this is two of the cars that Garrison wants to know about, I think. I don't know if he was just bullshitting me or what. I think he was bullshitting you. Is that Wally Welch? Yeah, I just don't figure Wally Welch. I don't figure him for that shit, for shit like that. Does this look familiar? I don't know of anybody that had a truck in Dallas. Oh, he's probably showing them the photo of the green pickup truck. I don't know of anybody that had a truck in Dallas, and I assume this is where it was taken. The only car that I really know is the one that Wally Yates owned. And as I recall, that was a Buick. I think it was a Buick. What about Eugenio Cisneros? Does that name sound familiar? No. Jack Youngblood is the one I had in mind. He was kind of an adventurer. He wrote a book called The Devil to Pay, looks like. That's him. That's the one. Ooh, let's see if we can't find a copy of The Devil to Pay by Jack Youngblood. That's him. That's the same one. Patrick mentioned him. Yeah. And you say he was in Miami at one time. I'm almost positive that this is what it was because Patrick asked this guy, where's Youngblood at? And now he says he's in San Francisco. And he said what he's doing. And he said he was either writing this book or the book was just being published. You ever hear of Bruce Ray Carlin? No? In Dallas? What does he do? He was a messenger. He is a drifter, really. He doesn't have an occupation, but he was running messages at the time of the assassination, driving all night to New Orleans and driving back to Dallas. How about Frank Ferrero? Is he from Dallas? No, from New York, arrested in connection with the Minutemen and planned some attack in some left-wing group in New York. I don't know. Ever hear of Robert Ahler, A-H-L-E-R? No. What about any of the names that have come up in our investigation, like Guy Bannister? Nope. David Ferry or any of those? No, I didn't. The closest connection I had was Billings told me that he had talked with Larry Laborde since July of last year, since Mike Acoppa, ACOPA, came out and did that tape of me. And he said Larry Laborde distinctly recalls Howard Davis coming from Miami to New Orleans, and they were together, and that Davis called Ferry on the phone. This is the only thing I know of. How about Andre Angelis? The name doesn't mean anything to me. By the way, I told you that I'd get a copy of that Adelot suit against Bradley. Did you want that? This goes in where one guy says Gene Bradley is a deviant, like Bradley goes around screwing all the different women or switching partners and all this jazz. We don't care about that. I just wanted it's kind of off the trail for us. Ever hear of Jim Braden from Los Angeles? I think I have. Supposedly an oil man. The name is real familiar. Let me tell you about Jim Braden. Jim Braden is one of the people, I don't know if you'd say he was arrested, but he was detained at the scene of the assassination because he just run upstairs and made a phone call in the Daltex building. And when he was asked to produce his credentials, it turned out he's from Los Angeles, oil man Jim Braden, and they turned him loose with no more than that. So we check out the address that he gave for him, and the address does not exist. Apparently, he showed him credentials if they didn't change his name. Jim Braden is of interest because he was there on the scene. There are a number of men like that pop up, but Jim Braden is an interesting guy, an oil man from L.A. He's at the scene of the assassination, and he can't explain why he's there. He just arrived about 2 days before, and he's staying at the Cabana and leaves immediately afterwards. If he has any connection with that group, it would be pretty interesting. The first call Ruby made after the assassination was to Los Angeles. Yes, it was. Yes, it certainly was. The first call Ruby made after the assassination was to Al fucking Gruber. We're going to have to get to Al Gruber one of these days and pull everything on that fucking guy, too. No need to do it now. What's Jerry Patrick Hemming doing now? He works for the city, laying water pipe or gas line or something. Seems like he's lost a lot of his contacts. Is he still sort of investigating the assassination? Yes. Here's Charles J. Hirsch's address. It's 12200 Wixon, North Hollywood. The only significance is that he's one of the people Ruby called. You can't give that too much significance because they've eliminated some of his calls and they're still secret. Here's the thing. Maybe Hirsch is a friend of Bradley's or something. Which they might know or not. I'm sorry, guys. Let me pause because I'm a fucking moron. And I'm going to screenshot this because this is of some significance. This is in reference to the phone call he made after the assassination, but not after Oswald got arrested. So I apologize for that. We're going to have to pull everything on Charles J. Hirsch at 12200 Wixon, North Hollywood. And I've screenshotted it. Remind me to put the screenshot in the chat. Which they might know or not. Did you know there's a New Orleans man in Ralph Paul's possession of names, Norman Rogers? We should check him out. Ralph Paul is called continuously by Ruby in the final days. Magnolia State Builders. Ever hear of that? So Ralph Paul's real name is Ralph Paul John. That's why they called him Johnny. Yeah, right down here on Broad Street. They were in that Impresto case. We've got to make a note to check on Norman Rogers. Check out Norman Rogers sometime. Ralph Paul has his name. Ever hear of a guy named Lee Osborne in Whittier? 5 will get you 10 if I've met him if he lives in Whittier. Where in Simi, California? That's not too far from L.A. Ronald D. McGid, M-A-G-I-D, lives there. He's a nephew of Jack Ruby. He's Jack Ruby's nephew. Ruby's always calling people in California. Los Angeles is all over the place. We'll get out of California. I'll get your address. There are probably quite a few I just passed over. I'll send them to you. Do you all have any other questions? If you don't, I'm going to skip some things for his own interest that he might want to read to refresh his memory. We don't have to have the tape on for that. When you made this trip to General Walker's house, did you all meet at the used car lot? No, as I recall, I don't remember where in the hell we met. We could have met in front of it. I don't remember. I, honest to God, don't remember. I do know that we met him someplace. Who was at the meeting? Patrick, myself, and this Warren is where we met him. As I recall, we set like a time like 9:30 or 10 o'clock in the morning, and he said, we'll meet here at 1 o'clock, for example. And so Patrick and myself left, and Boats Welch wanted to meet Walker also. So we took Boats Welch and his wife in his car because I had the back seat out of my car, as I recall, or else we would have took my car. I don't know which it was. Anyway, we drove to his house and we met with this Reynolds out in front of the house, and we went up and Reynolds knocked on the door, and I think it was Duffy, the one who opened the door, and he let us right on it. General Walker was sitting in the other room. What was that meeting about? About the only thing that was discussed was Reynolds, as I recall, introduced Patrick as the fellow who was just arrested down in No Name Key for training Cubans, and that he'd been in the Marine Corps, and that he wants to get up an organization and wanted to meet you. So this is what evolved around. Walker then started talking about this woman that was on a newspaper over in Europe someplace, and they pull up all this crap, and so he says, and he started talking about Mississippi or Alabama, wherever they had that thing where he was arrested at. He talked a little bit about that, like I really didn't go down with a gun and incite all that bit. They then talked about this organization Patrick wanted to start, and he gave Walker a copy of the SOPs and all this, standard operating procedures of the organization, Interpen, I think it was, in the name of it or something. And they talked about Vietnam, and they talked like if Patrick is going to get this thing going and he's going to have it in some other country because this government won't let him organize, started here. Did he mention to Patrick that he had been shot at? As I recall, he didn't mention a damn thing about it. In fact, I'm almost positive that he didn't. When was this you went there? This would have been in January of 63. What did Reynolds look like? I would say he was stocky, probably shorter than me, probably somewhere around 5'8", and he was probably, well, I wouldn't even want to say his age, probably somewhere I would say he was closer 30 or something like that. This was 63, and he wore a suit. Were you ever in his office on the used car lot? No, as I recall, he either worked at an Oldsmobile or a Ford car place. That's all I remember. How many meetings did you have with Warren Reynolds? Just one. Was Hemming there? Yeah, Hemming and myself and this Warren Reynolds, or whatever his name is. Remember, Warren Reynolds is the witness to the Tippit shooting. Did Hemming say anything about Reynolds after the meeting with Reynolds? What was his connection with Walker? No, because the connection to Reynolds came through Morris, and like Patrick didn't know Reynolds. It comes out in the testimony somewhere that Warren Reynolds and General Walker didn't know one another. In Warren Reynolds' testimony, he admits talking to General Walker 5 or 6 times, and then they said that what you did discuss, and he said, I'd rather not say, and the Warren Commission just says, oh, excuse us. What about Joseph Moore? The name doesn't mean a thing to me. He's about 5'10", maybe a little shorter, blonde hair, ex-Marine. Dallas? No, New Orleans, Miami, California. You have a picture of him? No, in stature, he would be somewhat similar to Oswald. No, I don't know him. William Dalzell? The name sounds like I could have heard it before, but I can't place it. You mentioned earlier that Billings showed you a photograph of Sylvia Odio that you requested. Did he show Howard a photograph of Odio too? I don't know. I have no idea. When Billings interviewed you, was Howard around? No, I haven't seen Howard since '63. How about Dennis Harper, who seems to be all over the place at No Name Key and all around? Have you ever bumped into him? I might have, Jim. He was a queer, a professor. Wait a minute. There was somebody who was always around the bookstore they called the professor. I have met him. He's a homo who was staying with him. One of Patrick's group was staying with him. Would a picture help some of the group? I know all the group. I'm trying to think of who in the hell it would be, and when I say who I think it is, I think it was Ed Collins. The one killed, dead. I know that one of the guys was staying they called him Professor, and one of the guys was staying with him. What was his angle, this guy Harper? I have no idea except for the fact that he hung around the bookstore. Oh, he was at the bookstore all the time. This was the right-wing bookstore. Yeah, and as I recall, it's funnier than hell because I've seen the guy they call the Professor. We got a pretty good picture of him. He's sitting on top of a pile of driftwood at No Name Key. In fact, the reason I laughed, it was a big joke they were saying, like they were talking to Ed Collins as if Ed Collins was living with Harper. Like, well, it's your turn tonight, you son of a bitch, and this is the way they were talking. It's common knowledge that he was a homo. There was something about blowing up ships in Veracruz or something like that. Do you know anything about that? Patrick told me something about that. No, I don't remember. Did he recently visit Nebraska? Patrick? No, Harper. No, I don't recall anything about it. I do know, hell no. Now I know who it was that was stayed with the professor. It was almost positive it was Ponce de Leon. Oh, I don't remember his name. He's in the picture. The little guy. The fact of the matter is he's from Louisiana. His mother was in prison in Cuba, and she got released in about April. Or she got released from prison in Cuba, and instead of coming to New Orleans, she went to Georgia. I think it was Atlanta, Georgia. Let me pick him out for you. That's him, Ponce. How could you pick him out? Just the way he described him. In fact, I'll tell you, the professor had a room rented in not a flunky-dunk hotel, but a cheap hotel. It would be on the one main drags in the Cuban part, like the Southwest or some damn street down there. Who do you think this is, Clinton Hampton? No, I don't know. His hair's too dark for Seymour, isn't it? That's who I think it is, but like I say, I don't know. This is Steve Wilson, and that's Ponce de Leon. That's Patrick, that's Howard, that's Davis, that's Garman, that's Hargraves. That might be Seymour, but he's showing them pictures of Inderpen. That might be Seymour, but I do know that they said Seymour's picture was in here because I remember they had an exact picture of this when I got to Florida. This is at the police station or the Keys after they had been arrested and they were being released. How come you didn't make this photograph? I was never on the Key. How about Gene Bentley, a one-legged man? It says one-legged man very active in anti-Castro activities. He must have been one hell of a man. How about Zeferino Perez? Doesn't mean a thing. How about Jerome Harold, a chiropractor, one of the biggest NSRP men in New Orleans, less known as a chiropractor. Ever heard of him? No. William R. Lyon? Yeah, I know Lyon. Lyon is with Schick Razor. His name sure keeps coming up. He was active in the American Committee to Free Cuba. Yeah, that's him because he's on the board of directors with Dr. Del Junco and Jose Norman. Jose Norman was going to come to Miami with us and possibly go on the raid with us, but our guns were late being finished, and so it held us up 5 days, so we couldn't go. Is William R. Lyon connected with Schick? Yeah, he's one of their top. He's an executive with them. I don't know what he is, but he's an executive with them. In fact, he gave me a check for $350 from the Free Cuba Committee, and that's what I bought the camera from Billings. From Billings? From Hathcock. That's Ponce. That's Garman. All of them. This is crazy bastard. This is the crazy bastard. He carried a gun with him and he'd pull it out and wave it around. You didn't know whether the damn thing was going to go off or not. And he says, kill them all. He's closely associated with Bob Brown of Boulder, Colorado. Is he? Garrison says, yeah, you know Captain Brown. Is that Garman? No, that's Dempsey. That's Seymour. That's Patrick. That's Howard. Garman, I don't see in these two who these two are. That's Steve Wilson, Howard, and that's Hargraves. Is that Hargraves? Yeah, that's him. Ponce de Leon? How about Eddie Field Jr.? That name doesn't mean anything. The fact of the matter is Lyons was one of the ones that offered me some money from some of the film and if I got any in Cuba. Here's news about Houghton. I guess you've seen that. I heard about it, but I haven't seen it. What happened to you in Dallas when you were arrested? Well, we had stayed in a real cheap flunky-dunk hotel that night, and the next morning we were on our way out to Logue's office, and we were on the, whatever they call it, Mockingbird Freeway or whatever the hell it is, going out to the, and then it's, to the building, something's redacted here, where Logue has his office. And a police car pulled up behind us, flashes his lights, and I pull over and he says, I asked him what the trouble was, and he says, I can't see your driver license, your license plate. Anyway, he says, I can't see your license plate because of the trailer hitch, and I said, I'll take it off for you. And he said, let me see your driver's license, and I showed him my driver's license, and as soon as he got my driver's license, he went right up the front door, opened up the front door, reached in, opened the glove box compartment, took out the pills, and we went to the police station. Did anybody know that you had the pills there? It just sounds like he was waiting for you. I thought the same thing, but Christ. You know what happened afterwards, the way the events transpired? Yeah, but I don't know. I could say Howard knew, but Howard's as innocent of the goddamn thing as I am, so what the hell? I was thinking about the guy back in California, like Drennan. They knew that I had the stuff because they gave it to me, but Christ, I got drugs. I shouldn't say drugs, but I got all kinds of medical stuff from this shit, 25 or 30 different doctors. Did Wally Yates give you any? No. Come take a look at this for your own interest. It tells about some of the things happening. And then Hall says, who's this to? Garrison says, oh, that's to Hathcock from Hemming. Nothing special, just a lot of details of what's going on to refresh your memory. The only thing we wanted was a description of the two friends of John Lorenz. I think one is a Latin. Well, John Lorenz, I would say in 1963 appeared to be about 30. I'd say 32, 33. He had dark hair, dark complexion, but not like a Mexican or anything. He had a good suntan. Probably stood 5'9", appeared to weigh 165, dark eyes and a thin build, not muscular at all. He was a house painter, I think, by trade. And then he had a man that appeared to be Latin extract, real dark complected, husky build, and as I recall, probably 5'9", 5'10". Probably weighed 170, 75, had a mod haircut, which means I think it was short, but he combed it straight back, and he was a nice appearing person. He was a handsome man. I do not know what type of work he did. In fact, I don't think that he worked because I never seen them work. I was in contact with them 4 or 5 times during the day when they came up to Wheat's house and like they weren't working. The other fellow, as I recall, was 26 or 27. As I recall, he was blonde, a real athletic build. He was, I had the impression he was the muscle for Lorenz, and they were all highly anti-Semitic. And I don't know about Bradley, but they say they knew him, but they didn't say they knew him, but they went along with Bradley. Like if you should really try to get to know McIntyre because McIntyre's really on the ball. But yet they seemed like they had their own thing going as well. I don't know how to explain this. It's like they were associated with all these people, but they had something of their own going as well. I don't know what in the hell it was. And then something is inaudible on the part of Garrison. Hall says, yeah, now when I say this, what I meant is the left house together. Now, whether they got in the car together or whatever, they talked outside together. I don't know, but I do know that Gale, Lorenz, his 2 buddies, and Bradley all left at the same time. You say now that you can't remember any of the buddies' names, and you can't remember hearing maybe Lorenz refer to any of his buddies by nicknames. I can't remember. I tried. I laid down that damn hospital and racked my brain trying to remember what their names were, but I can't recall their names. Did you happen to notice if the Latin-looking individual had any pockmarks on his face? Jesus Christ. Fucking goddamn it, Garrison. You're just dancing around it. I don't recall that he did have. It's like they wanted to know if he had a scar. I don't recall he did. It's quite possible that he did, but I don't recall that. What was his build? He wasn't as husky as Mo. He was built like that, but yet he had a good build on him. He looked like probably worked out once in a while, handball or something in good physical shape and around. I'd say he was 5'9", somewhere around that, probably 170, 75. The type of haircut that you spoke about before, I think we talked about it last night, and I Don't know if I'm using the correct terminology, but around here, I heard that the type of haircut, which was basically long on the sides and flat on the top, referred to as a Balboa cut. Is that the type you're referring to? No, I think what you're referring to is long sides and a flat top, right? As I recall, this is not the type of haircut that he had. As I recall, the hair was probably not over 2 inches long, something like that, and he combed it back. In other words, it was evenly cut all around his head. Right. As I recall, that's what it was. William Garland, who do you remember him to associate with? I associate him with Bradley. Not with Bradley, with Renuzzi, and I associate him with Gale and Dr. Drennan. This is a matter of public record out in California. He had a chicken farm out in the San Fernando Valley, and he took a fall for having explosives and automatic weapons on him on his property, and Russell got a complete rundown on him. When was he killed? The 4th of last March. He was in his pickup out in, I think, Santa Ana Freeway, and there was no cars around or nothing, no witnesses to it or nothing else, and he just flipped over, fell out of the car, and split his skull open. He didn't even hit another car? No, I asked Russell if I could go out and take a look at the car, and he said I've already done that because I thought there might be some foul play. And I said, what about a steering mechanism? Because last Sunday, my car had its steering mechanism go out, and he said he checked the whole car over, and they couldn't find a thing. Let me ask you about Dick Whatley. Do you know anything about Dick Whatley? Dick Whatley is the title which the Bureau has had on their memo about seeing Hathcock about your arrival. It says Dick Whatley, 3315 Northwest 18th Terrace in Miami. The reason we're interested in it is because we find Whatley now lives. There's a Richard Whatley living in Baton Rouge now, apparently the same person. How does he come up? Do you know? I have no idea whatsoever. The only thing I remember about the name of Whatley is that Robert K. Brown makes a report to the FBI telling all the details of this meeting with Drennan, wanting to get rid of Kennedy and all this. And at the top of the sheets was the name, I think, R.D. or something like that, or something Whatley. It's all I can remember. The first time I met Howard Davis was on the first day that we got into Miami with Patrick and went to Davis's house. What year would that have been? That would have been January of 1963. Davis at the time had a burr cut, a flat, burr cut. How tall are you? About 5'10", 5'9 and a half. No, I thought he was, no, because I'm 5'10 and a half. 5'9", says Jim Garrison. And then Loran Hall says, well, I would say that Davis is probably 5'8 and a half, 5'9", probably weighed about 185. He was sort of round-faced. I guess I'd say that he was probably 30 or 31 years old. He was married to a Cuban woman, as I recall. He did not work, and it was my impression that he hadn't worked for quite a few months. He was one of the leaders of Patrick's group, and they did a lot of talking together, but it was mostly private. They'd go over to the side and talk, which was fine with me, because I wasn't part of their organization, but it always seemed to me that Patrick took orders, but that Davis would recommend something, and that this is what Patrick did. What color hair did he have? I would say it would be a light brown, between blonde and a light brown. I would say ruddy, fair, ruddy complexion. I knew that he was at least, he stated that he was a pilot in Cuba, for Castro or Raul, I think it was, and I never met him in Cuba, but this is what he referred to me, and he told me that he had been over there, and Patrick said the same thing. And I know that he was a pilot, and I know that he also flew the plane with Patrick and Steve Wilson when they went to look for Alexander Rourke when he came up missing. They left, as I recall, Miami sometime around November 5th or 6th of 1963, looking for Rourke. Did he take part in the Bay of Pigs? I don't know. Is that the only time that you met him? No, I met him, 7 or 8 times with Patrick, and every time they had anything to say, they'd always get out on the side and talk things out. Is that about anything? Is that about the significant part of what you can remember? Yeah, except for that Billings tells me that he talked to Larry Laborde personally sometime since July of last year, and he says that Laborde remembers Davis being in New Orleans and calling Ferry. About what time was that? I have no idea. It would have been from last July, and I talked to Billings about 3 weeks ago, and you said that Billings does have a picture of Howard Davis? Yeah, he's got a picture of Howard Davis. Okay, fine. And that's the end of the interview. Kind of abrupt, but nonetheless, that's it. So this is the second of 2 lost interviews of Loran Hall. We are going to return now, next episode, back to Mexico City, where we still have some work to do. But once we get done with Mexico City, we'll return to Loran Hall, and we'll go over the 100-plus motherfucking interview of Harold Weisberg. And I'm just sitting here dreading that already, because I can tell the absolute disgusting level of fucking minutia that nobody understands that Harold Weisberg is going to go into in this fucking interview. And it's going to drive everyone crazy. So you get to enjoy that along with me. But that's it for today, guys. Buy the book, all right? Buy the fucking book. I need to make some money. Please buy the book. I want to go on Fish Tour. If you want to buy a signed book, I'll have signed books in here in about, I don't know, 2 weeks, I think is the expected date. So, but that's it, guys. I'm out of here. I will be back tomorrow. Thank you.